So let me tell you this story. There was this guy who smoked for 20 years. I mean, he tried everything to quit. Patches, therapy, he even tried hypnosis. Nothing worked. Then he's on a business trip in Japan and he learns this simple, kind of counterintuitive method from a monk. And get this, within 3 months, his 20-year habit was just gone. Not because he fought it, but because of a technique that felt almost too easy to work. So what did he learn? Well, it all kicks off with one really powerful idea.
Seriously, what if the very act of fighting your habits, of struggling against them, is what's giving them all their power? That's the core question behind a Japanese approach that suggests we can let bad habits just, well, fade away on their own, without that exhausting, uphill battle of willpower we're all so used to.
Okay, so first we have to talk about why our usual methods just don't seem to stick. I like to call it the willpower trap. This slide really just lays it all out, doesn't it? In the West, we tend to declare all-out war on our bad habits, right? We go from 0 to 100. We start some insane gym plan or delete every social media app from our phone. And then, when we inevitably slip up, we just get buried in shame. But the Japanese approach shown here, it's the total opposite. It's not about force, it's about observation. It's about curiosity and these tiny, gradual improvements.
You know, this right here is the heart of it. Our bad habits aren't actually our enemies. They all started out as a solution to some problem. That cigarette break, it was a solution for stress. That late-night pint of ice cream, maybe a solution for loneliness. The moment we stop seeing them as these evil enemies and start to understand, hey, where did you come from? That's when we can change the pattern without having to fight it.
So how do we actually do that? Well, that brings us to the second big principle: learning to just observe your urges, not fight them. There's this great story about a young monk who was just consumed by anger. He tried everything to get it under control, meditation, fasting, you name it. But it seemed like the harder he fought it, the stronger it got. Then an older monk gave him this advice and it completely changed his life, just by flipping his perspective.
And this is exactly how the technique works in the real world. Instead of trying to shove the anger down, the monk just noted its presence. He'd just think, anger is here. He'd feel where it was in his body, the heat in his chest, the tension in his jaw. He noticed the thoughts that were swirling around it. And the key part? He didn't judge it or fight it. He just watched. And by creating that little bit of space between himself and the emotion, he realized he could feel anger without being controlled by it.
And this exact same idea of observation applies directly to cravings. The goal isn't to stop the wave from coming, but to learn how to ride it until it passes on its own.
This is such a powerful shift in how you see yourself. That craving for a cigarette or for sugar or to check your phone, it's just a temporary event passing through you. You're the sky, the craving is just a cloud. It's not who you are.
And here is the secret weapon that makes this whole thing so doable. Research shows that the peak intensity of most cravings, the part that feels absolutely overwhelming, it only lasts for about 3 to 5 minutes. That's it. In the moment, they feel like they're going to last forever, but they're incredibly short. Just knowing that makes that wave feel a whole lot less scary.
Okay, so how does this turn into a real, practical method? Let's go back to that businessman who smoked for 20 years. This is literally what he did. When an urge hit, he'd acknowledge it. He'd even pick up a cigarette, hold it, smell it, really experience the craving. But then he'd set a timer for 10 minutes, and he'd just sit there and surf that wave, noticing how it would get really intense around the 3-minute mark and then just start to fade. By the time that timer went off, the urge was so much weaker that he could actually make a conscious choice instead of being on autopilot.
Okay, this brings us to the engine that makes this entire approach sustainable. It's the power of Kaizen, or what you can think of as the 1% improvement.
Our culture is obsessed with dramatic overnight transformations, right? That all-or-nothing approach that almost always leads to burnout. Kaizen is the exact opposite. It's all about making changes that are so small they feel almost laughably insignificant, like deciding to watch just 5 fewer minutes of TV.
And the neuroscience behind this is just fascinating. See, big, drastic changes actually trigger your brain's alarm system, the amygdala. Your nervous system sees it as a threat, and it fights back with resistance and cravings and stress. But these tiny 1% changes, they're too small to set off the alarm. They just slip right past your brain's defenses, letting you build new patterns without that massive internal war.
Here is a perfect example of Kaizen in action. A woman broke a really bad online shopping addiction, not by dramatically cutting up her credit cards, but by starting with one tiny new rule: wait 24 hours before buying anything online. That was it. That tiny little pause was enough to break the impulse.
Then, over a few months, she gradually extended that waiting period. And she found that after a week, she usually didn't even want the stuff anymore. So finally, this whole system isn't really about destroying old habits. It's about building new ones that are so much better that the old ones just become obsolete.
Let's use a little metaphor here. Think of a bad habit like a well-worn path in a forest. It's wide, it's clear, it's super easy to follow. You don't take it because you love where it goes. You take it because it's the path of least resistance.
Now, you can't just magically erase that old path, but every single time you choose a new action, even a tiny one, like going for a 5-minute walk instead of grabbing a snack, you start to forge a new little trail. And meanwhile, that old path, since it's not being used, slowly starts to get overgrown with weeds and branches. And with enough repetition, that new path gets wider and clearer and easier to walk down. And eventually, it becomes your brain's new path of least resistance. You see, change isn't really about willpower, it's about repetition. It's about patiently walking a new path day after day until it feels completely automatic.
So it really all comes down to this. Your habit isn't some enemy you have to defeat in a brutal battle. It's just a well-worn path. And you have all the power you need to start walking a new one. Not with some giant, scary leap, but with a single, tiny 1% step. So the only real question left is, what new path are you going to start walking today?